I arrived at Aurelia Magic Academy with a suitcase in one hand and hope in the other. The tall silver gates towered over me, and my heart pounded like a drum. "First time here?" a boy beside me asked. I nodded. "Yeah." He smiled and held out his hand. "I'm Ethan." "I'm Adrian," I replied, shaking his hand. "Don't worry," Ethan said. "Everyone looks nervous on the first day." "I'm not nervous," I muttered. He raised an eyebrow. "You're shaking." I looked down. My hands were trembling. "Okay," I admitted quietly. "Maybe a little." A loud bell rang across the courtyard. Students began moving toward the evaluation hall. "That's the entrance test," Ethan said. "Let's go." Inside the hall, dozens of students gathered around a large circular arena. At the center stood a tall man with silver hair and sharp eyes. "Welcome," he announced calmly. "I am Professor Aldrich. Today you will demonstrate your magical ability." Students stepped forward one by one. A girl raised her hand and shouted, "Ignis Flare." A blazing fireball shot across the arena. The crowd clapped. Another student summoned a storm of wind that lifted dust into the air. Ethan leaned toward me. "Okay, those are pretty good." "Pretty good." I whispered, "They're incredible." My stomach twisted. Then a tall boy with dark hair stepped forward confidently. "Victor Hale," someone whispered behind me. Victor lifted his hand casually. "Thunder strike." Lightning exploded from his palm and cracked against the arena wall. Gasps filled the room. Victor smiled like he already knew he was the best. Ethan muttered, "Show off." Professor Aldrich nodded slightly. "Impressive control." Victor looked around the room like a king examining his subjects. Then his eyes landed on me. "Your turn," Aldrich said. My heart dropped. I walked slowly into the center of the arena. Victor chuckled. "This should be entertaining." I clenched my fists. "Go ahead," Aldrich said calmly. I raised my hand. "Focus," I whispered to myself, just like I practiced. "Spark," I said. Nothing happened. A few students snickered. I swallowed hard and tried again. "Spark." A tiny flicker appeared, then vanished instantly. Laughter erupted across the room. "Did you see that?" Someone shouted. "That wasn't even a spell." Victor crossed his arms. "Is this a joke?" My face burned. "I can do it," I muttered. "Just give me a second." Victor laughed loudly. Maybe the academy lowered its standards this year. More laughter followed. Ethan shouted from the crowd, "Ignore them." I tried one more time. "Spark." A weak flash appeared, smaller than a candle flame. Then it died. Silence hung in the air for a moment. Then the entire hall burst into laughter. The weakest mage I've ever seen. Did he come to the wrong school? Victor stepped closer to the arena edge. "Hey," he called to me. "Are you sure you didn't get lost on your way to a farming academy?" The crowd roared again. I wanted to disappear. Professor Aldrich raised a hand, and the room slowly quieted. "Enough," he said. His voice was calm but powerful. He looked directly at me. "Place your hand on the crystal." A glowing blue crystal floated above a pedestal. I walked toward it slowly. My chest felt heavy. Victor whispered loudly to his friends, "Let's see how pathetic his magic really is." I placed my hand on the crystal. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a faint gray glow appeared inside the crystal. It flickered weakly, barely visible. The crowd erupted again. "Is that it?" "That's lower than beginner level." Victor shook his head. "Incredible," he said mockingly. "The academy finally found someone with no magic at all." I stared at the crystal. The weak light reflected in my eyes. Professor Aldrich studied it carefully, his expression unreadable. "Record the result," he told the assistant. The assistant nodded. "Adrian Vale," he announced. "Magical output, extremely low." Victor laughed again. "Congratulations," he called. "You're officially the weakest student in Aurelia Magic Academy." More laughter filled the hall. I lowered my head. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to breathe. Ethan pushed through the crowd and walked up beside me. "Hey," he said quietly. I didn't look at him. That was rough, he admitted. You think? I muttered. He shrugged. So what if your magic is weak? It's not just weak, I said bitterly. It's nothing. Ethan crossed his arms. Listen, he said firmly. Everyone starts somewhere. Victor walked past us at that moment. He stopped beside me and smirked. You don't start here, he said coldly. You don't belong here. Then he walked away. I watched him go. My hands trembled again. Ethan nudged my shoulder. Don't listen to him, he said. I stared at the glowing crystal across the arena. Everyone had seen it. Everyone knew. I whispered under my breath, barely loud enough for even myself to hear. I won't stay weak forever. Morning bell. My stomach already tight. Ethan stretched on the other bed. Ready for another glorious day, Adrian. Define glorious, I muttered. He laughed softly. Okay, maybe not glorious. I grabbed my spell notebook. Today will be different. That's the spirit, Ethan said. Confidence. We walked into the training hall. Students filled the room, wands glowing, spells flying. Professor Dorian clapped his hands. Today we practice wind control. Marcus leaned against a pillar with 2 other students. Well, look who survived another night, he said loudly. I ignored him. Professor Dorian pointed toward the center. Adrian, step forward. My chest tightened. Show us the basic wind spell. Marcus grinned. This should be educational. I raised my hand slowly. Ventus, rise. Nothing. A few whispers started. I tried again. Ventus, rise. A tiny breeze lifted a piece of paper, then dropped it. Marcus burst out laughing. That's not wind, he said. That's a sigh. More laughter. My face burned. Professor Dorian frowned slightly. Again. I swallowed. Ventus. A voice interrupted. Professor, may I try? I looked over. A girl stepped forward. Long brown hair, calm eyes. Lena Carter, she said politely. Professor Dorian nodded. Lena raised her hand. Ventus spiral. Wind swirled around her like a small storm. The class clapped. Marcus whistled. Now that's magic. Lena looked at me. You were close, she said quietly. Marcus snorted. Close to what? Breathing. Lena frowned at him. You don't have to be cruel. Marcus shrugged. I'm just honest. I lowered my hand. Class dismissed, Professor Dorian said. Students began leaving. Marcus walked past me and bumped my shoulder. Careful, he said. You might hurt someone with that dangerous breeze. His friends laughed. Ethan stepped beside me. Don't listen to that idiot. I'm trying not to, I said. Lena approached us slowly. Hey, she said gently. I forced a small smile. Hi. You shouldn't give up, she said. I'm not, I replied. She tilted her head. Good. Marcus called from across the room. Hey Lena, stop babysitting the weakest mage alive. She rolled her eyes. See you later, she told me. Ethan crossed his arms. She seems nice. Yeah, I said quietly. But Marcus. Ethan added. Total jerk. We walked toward the courtyard. I sighed. Maybe he's right. Ethan stopped walking. No. I can't cast basic spells, I said. So? He replied. So maybe I shouldn't be here. Ethan shook his head firmly. You earned your place. Did I? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then he said quietly, You will. That evening I walked alone to the academy library. Tall shelves surrounded me. The room was quiet. I opened a book about magic control. Focus your core, I whispered while reading. I raised my hand. Spark. A tiny flicker appeared. Then disappeared. I sighed. Pathetic. I froze. Voices echoed from the other side of the shelves. Victor. Marcus spoke first. I still can't believe that guy got into Aurelia. Victor laughed softly. Why does the academy even allow useless students like him? Marcus chuckled. Maybe they need entertainment. Victor continued. Watching him try to cast spells is painful. My chest tightened. Marcus said, "Want me to challenge him tomorrow?" Victor replied calmly, "No need." Why? Victor's voice turned cold. People like him defeat themselves. Silence followed. Then Victor added, "He'll quit eventually." Footsteps moved away. I stayed frozen behind the shelf. My hands clenched slowly. Quit. Was that what everyone expected? I leaned against the bookshelf and closed my eyes. My mother's voice echoed in my memory. "Adrian, you have a special destiny." I whispered bitterly, "Yeah, right." For a moment I almost believed Victor. Maybe I didn't belong here. Maybe I was the weakest student. Maybe everyone was right. I looked down at my trembling hand. Then I raised it again. Spark. A faint light appeared. It flickered weakly, but it stayed. I stared at it. My chest filled with quiet determination. I whispered to myself in the empty library, "I won't stay weak forever." The next day started exactly the way the previous one ended, with embarrassment. Professor Dorian folded his arms as I stood in the practice circle again. "Adrian," he said, "try the focus spell." I nodded slowly. My classmates watched like they were waiting for a joke. "Focus," I whispered, raising my hand. Nothing. Marcus laughed loudly. "There it is," he said. "The famous invisible spell." Some students chuckled. My face burned. Professor Dorian sighed. "Again." I tried again. Focus. A tiny spark appeared, then vanished. Marcus clapped slowly. "Brilliant performance." I lowered my hand. "Enough," Professor Dorian said. "Return to your seat." As I walked back, Marcus whispered loudly, "Careful, the weakest mage might explode with power." More laughter followed. I sat down beside Ethan. He leaned toward me. "Ignore them." "I'm trying," I muttered. After class ended, students poured into the hallway. Marcus bumped my shoulder again. "Practice harder," he said. "Maybe one day you'll cast a candle spell." His friends laughed as they walked away. I kept walking. Then I heard a calm voice behind me. "Adrian." I turned around. Professor Aldrich stood in the hallway, his silver hair catching the light. "Yes, Professor." I asked. He studied me for a moment. "Have you ever tried controlling your magic differently?" I blinked. "Differently?" "Yes." "I barely have magic at all," I said quietly. Aldrich tilted his head. "Are you sure?" I frowned. The crystal test said my power was extremely low. He nodded slowly. "Crystals measure what they see." "I don't understand." He stepped closer. "When you attempted your spells," he said calmly, "I felt something unusual." "Unusual?" I repeated. "Your magic did not feel weak." I stared at him. "Then why can't I cast spells?" Aldrich folded his hands behind his back. "Because your magic feels sealed." "Sealed?" "Yes." I shook my head. "That doesn't make sense." "Many things in magic do not make sense at first," he replied. Students passed us in the hallway. Marcus glanced at us suspiciously. Aldrich spoke quietly. "Meet me tonight behind the training hall." I blinked again. "Why?" "Because I want to test my theory." "You want to train me?" He nodded. "After hours." "Why me?" I asked. He smiled slightly. "Because everyone else stopped looking." That night I stood behind the training hall. Cold wind brushed across the empty field. Aldrich appeared a moment later. "Good," he said. "You came." "I almost didn't," I admitted. "Fear." "Confusion." He gestured toward the practice ground. "Let's begin." I stepped forward. "What should I do?" "Cast your spark spell." "That's it." "Yes." I raised my hand. "Spark." A weak flicker appeared, then vanished. Aldrich watched carefully. Again. "Spark." Another weak light. He walked around me slowly. "Interesting." "What is?" I asked. Your magic flow. I frowned. It feels blocked, he continued. Blocked how? Like a river behind a dam. I stared at my hands. So what do I do? Stop forcing power. Then what? Control your breathing. I followed his instructions. Now try again, he said. Spark. The light appeared again. This time it lasted a little longer. Aldrich nodded slowly. Better. We repeated the exercise again and again. Each attempt ended the same way. Weak magic. Failure. After the 10th attempt I groaned. This isn't working. Aldrich shook his head. You're impatient. I've been failing for weeks. Exactly. I rubbed my forehead. Maybe everyone is right. Aldrich looked directly at me. Everyone is usually wrong. I tried again. Spark. The light flickered. For a moment it brightened slightly, then faded. Aldrich's eyes narrowed with interest. Did you feel that? Feel what? That surge. I shook my head. I felt nothing. He smiled faintly. Good. Good. I asked. That means the power is still hiding. I sighed and dropped my arm. So what now? We continue tomorrow. Tomorrow. And the next day. That sounds exhausting. Aldrich chuckled softly. Power often hides behind exhaustion. As we walked back toward the academy building, I noticed a figure watching us from a distance. Victor. He stood near the courtyard entrance. His eyes followed us carefully. Marcus stood beside him. Marcus whispered something. Victor crossed his arms. I swallowed. He saw us, I said quietly. Aldrich glanced toward the courtyard. Yes. Is that bad? Curiosity is natural, he replied. Victor turned and walked away. Marcus looked back once before following him. I felt uneasy. They'll start rumors. Aldrich shrugged slightly. Let them. We reached the academy doors. I looked at him. Professor, do you really think I have magic? He studied my face. Then he spoke quietly. Your power is not small, boy. I held my breath. He turned and walked down the hall. Over his shoulder he added one final sentence. It is sleeping. The next week became the hardest week of my life. Every night I met Professor Aldrich behind the training hall. Every night he pushed me harder. Again, he said. I raised my hand, breathing slowly. Spark. A weak light appeared. Then vanished. Aldrich shook his head. Your focus broke. I tried, I said. Trying is not controlling. I groaned. That sounds like the same thing. It is not. I rubbed my arms. I'm exhausted. Good, he replied calmly. Good. I asked. Fatigue removes hesitation. I stared at him. You enjoy this, don't you? Aldrich smiled slightly. Only when you complain. I sighed and raised my hand again. Spark. A slightly brighter light appeared. Aldrich stepped closer. Hold it. I'm trying. The light flickered, then vanished again. I dropped my arm. I can't keep it stable. Yes, you can. I've failed 30 times tonight. Then try 31. I groaned loudly. You're impossible. And you are stubborn, he replied. I tried again. Spark. The light lasted longer, then faded. Aldrich nodded. Better. I sat on the ground, breathing heavily. Why are you so sure my magic is sealed? He folded his arms. Because weak magic does not behave like yours. How does mine behave? Like something pushing against a wall. I looked at my hands. So there's really power inside me. Yes. Then why can't I reach it? Because you're afraid. I frowned. I'm not afraid. You are. Of what? Of losing control. I opened my mouth to argue. Then I stopped. Maybe he was right. Aldrich gestured toward the training field. Stand up. I groaned again. More training. Yes. I stood slowly. What spell this time? Basic force. That's harder than spark. Exactly. I lifted my hand. Force. Nothing happened. I sighed. Again, Aldrich said. Force. A faint ripple appeared. Then disappeared. Aldrich walked in a slow circle around me. Focus on the emotion behind your magic. What emotion? Anything real. I closed my eyes. Marcus laughing. Victor mocking me. The crowd calling me weak. My chest tightened. I raised my hand again. Force. A stronger ripple burst outward. A wooden training dummy shook slightly. Aldrich's eyes sharpened. Again. My heart started racing. Force. Energy burst from my hand. A loud crack echoed across the field. The dummy split down the middle. I stared at it. Did I do that? Aldrich stepped forward quickly. Again, he said. But stronger. I don't know how. Stop thinking. I clenched my fists. Force. Something exploded inside me. A violent wave of magic burst from my body. 3 training dummies shattered instantly. Wood splintered across the ground. A shockwave rippled through the field. I stumbled backward. What just happened? My hands trembled. That wasn't a basic spell. Aldrich stared at the destroyed field. His expression looked both amazed and troubled. This confirms my theory, he said quietly. What theory? He looked directly at me. Your magic was sealed long ago. Sealed by who? I don't know yet. I stared at the broken dummies. That power felt huge. Yes, Aldrich said. And dangerous. I swallowed. So what do we do now? We learn control. Before he could continue, a voice echoed from the shadows. Well, well. My stomach dropped. Victor stepped into the light. Marcus and 2 other students stood behind him. Marcus whistled. Did you see that? Victor's eyes focused on the destroyed field. I saw enough. My heart pounded. How long were you watching? I asked. Victor ignored the question. Interesting trick, he said calmly. It wasn't a trick, I replied. Marcus laughed. So the weakest student suddenly explodes training dummies. Victor stepped closer. That wasn't normal magic. Aldrich spoke firmly. This training session is private. Victor shrugged. Not anymore. Marcus grinned. Everyone will love this story. Victor studied me carefully. You hid your power well. I didn't hide anything. He smirked. Of course. Marcus leaned toward Victor. Maybe it's forbidden magic. Victor's eyes narrowed. Maybe. Aldrich stepped between us. That's enough. Victor held up his hands casually. We are leaving. He turned toward the academy building. Marcus laughed again as he followed. This academy just got interesting. Their footsteps faded into the night. I looked at Aldrich. That's bad. Yes, he said calmly. Victor will spread rumors. Probably. I stared at my hands again. What if they think I'm dangerous? Aldrich looked at the broken dummies. They already do. I swallowed hard. Then what happens now? He turned toward the academy lights. Now the academy will start watching you. The rumors spread through the academy faster than I expected. When I entered the dining hall that morning, whispers followed me immediately. That's him. The one Victor talked about. The weakest student with hidden magic. I pretended not to hear them and sat beside Ethan. He leaned closer. You're famous now. That's not the kind of fame I wanted, I muttered. He lowered his voice. Victor told everyone you destroyed training dummies with one spell. It wasn't one spell, I said quietly. It just exploded. Ethan stared at me. You actually did it. I didn't mean to. He shook his head slowly. Adrian, that's not normal. Before I could answer, a loud bell rang across the hall. Students began standing. What's happening? I asked. Ethan grinned slightly. You'll see. We followed the crowd to the academy arena. Hundreds of students gathered around the platform. Professor Aldrich stood beside several other instructors. Then the academy headmaster stepped forward. "Students," he announced, "today we begin preparations for our most important event." Marcus whispered loudly from somewhere behind me. "Here it comes." The headmaster continued. "The Grand Student Tournament." Excited murmurs spread instantly. Ethan nudged me. "Biggest event of the year." The headmaster raised a hand. "This tournament will determine the strongest student in Aurelia Magic Academy." Victor stepped forward confidently from the crowd. "That title won't change," he said loudly. Some students laughed. Marcus clapped enthusiastically. "Victor wins again." Victor smirked slightly. "Obviously." The headmaster ignored the interruption. "The participant list will be posted this afternoon." Students began whispering excitedly. Ethan looked at me. "You should watch the matches." "Watch?" I asked. "Yeah. The fights are incredible." Later that afternoon, a large crowd gathered near the announcement board. I squeezed through the students beside Ethan. "Let's see the names," he said. Marcus stood near the board with Victor. Marcus pointed at the list. "There it is," he said proudly. "Victor Hale." Victor crossed his arms calmly. "Of course." Students kept reading the names. Then Ethan suddenly grabbed my shoulder. "Adrian." "What?" "You're on the list." I blinked. "What?" He pointed. My name sat near the bottom. Adrian Vale. Marcus noticed it at the same moment. He burst out laughing. "The weakest student wants to fight." More students turned toward me. "Is that a joke? Did someone make a mistake?" Victor stepped closer to the board and read the name again. His eyes moved toward me. "That's surprising," he said calmly. Marcus sneered. "He won't survive the first round." I felt my chest tighten. Ethan whispered, "You don't have to do it." Marcus laughed again. "Please do it. I want to see how fast he loses." Victor looked thoughtful. "Maybe he's hiding more magic," Marcus said mockingly. Victor shrugged. "We'll find out." Students slowly walked away, still whispering. Ethan turned to me. "Adrian, seriously, are you entering?" "I don't know," I admitted. "That tournament is dangerous." "I know." Marcus shouted from across the courtyard. "Don't quit before it starts." His friends laughed again. That night I met Professor Aldrich behind the training hall. "You saw the announcement?" he asked. "Yes." "And your name?" "I saw it." He folded his arms. "Good. Good." I repeated, "You should participate." I stared at him. "You can't be serious." "I am." "Professor, I barely control my magic." "Exactly. That's a terrible reason to fight." He shook his head. "Pressure reveals truth." "What if I lose?" "You probably will," he said calmly. I blinked. "That's encouraging." "But losing is not the goal," he continued. "Then what is?" "Breaking the seal." I looked down at my hands. What if my magic explodes again? Then we learn from it. I sighed. "You really believe in this?" "Yes." I looked toward the academy lights. Marcus laughing. Victor watching. Everyone expecting me to fail. I raised my hand slowly. Force. A small ripple pushed across the ground. It faded quickly, but it stayed stable. Aldrich nodded. "Better control." "I still don't trust it." "You will." I lowered my hand. What if the whole academy is watching? They will be. I took a deep breath. Then I said quietly, "All right." Aldrich raised an eyebrow. "You're entering." "Yes." "Why?" I thought about Marcus. Victor. Every voice calling me weak. Then I answered honestly. "Because I'm tired of running." Aldrich smiled faintly. "Good." I looked down at my hands again. For the first time since arriving at Aurelia Magic Academy, something new stirred inside my chest. Not fear. Confidence. The day of the tournament arrived faster than I expected. Ethan walked beside me toward the arena gates. "You still have time to back out," he said quietly. I already decided, I replied. He rubbed the back of his neck. I know. I'm just worried. I'll be fine. You said that before your last training explosion. I laughed nervously. Okay, maybe not fine. The arena roared with noise as we stepped inside. Hundreds of students filled the stands. Marcus stood across the field, stretching his arms like he was preparing for a simple workout. He saw me and laughed immediately. Well, look who showed up. I walked toward the center. Marcus grinned wider. This will be over in seconds. Students in the crowd started whispering. That's the weakest guy. He's fighting Marcus. Poor idiot. Professor Aldrich stood near the edge of the arena. He looked calm. Victor stood beside the other competitors, arms crossed. His eyes followed every movement I made. Marcus cracked his knuckles. You should have stayed in the library, he said. Maybe, I replied. But you didn't, he continued. No. The referee raised his hand. Begin. Marcus moved first. Wind strike. A sharp blast of air slammed toward me. I raised my hand quickly. Force. My barrier appeared too late. The wind threw me backward. The crowd laughed loudly. Marcus chuckled. That was pathetic. I stood up slowly. My heart pounded. Focus, I whispered to myself. Marcus lifted his hand again. Wind strike. Another blast flew toward me. Force. My shield flickered weakly. The attack pushed me several steps back. More laughter echoed through the arena. Marcus shook his head. You're wasting everyone's time. I clenched my fists. Try harder, he continued. Maybe you'll entertain us. Victor watched silently from the sidelines. Marcus raised both hands this time. Storm burst. Multiple blades of wind shot toward me. I tried to block them. Force. My shield shattered instantly. The wind slashed across my shoulder. Pain exploded through my arm. I stumbled again. The crowd cheered. Marcus laughed loudly. This is embarrassing. I struggled to stand. My breathing grew heavy. Marcus stepped closer. You should quit. I'm not quitting. He smirked. Then let's finish this. Marcus raised his hand one more time. His voice turned sharp. Gale collapse. A massive spiral of wind formed in front of him. The pressure pushed against my chest. The attack felt far stronger than the others. Fear crept into my mind. If that hit me directly. Move, I whispered to myself. But my legs wouldn't respond. Marcus smiled. Goodbye. The spiral launched toward me. Something inside me snapped. Every insult. Every laugh. Victor's voice calling me weak. Marcus mocking me again and again. The memories ignited inside my chest. I raised my hand without thinking. Force. Magic exploded from my body. Not a ripple. Not a flicker. A massive wave. The spiral of wind shattered instantly. A shockwave blasted across the arena. Marcus froze in place. The air itself seemed to vibrate. My magic surged outward like a storm. I felt it clearly this time. Strong. Stable. Overwhelming. Marcus's eyes widened. What is that? I didn't answer. I simply moved my hand forward. Force. The wave struck him instantly. Marcus flew backward and slammed into the arena wall. The impact echoed across the stadium. Silence fell. Complete silence. Marcus slid to the ground. Unconscious. I stood frozen in the center of the arena. My chest rose and fell slowly. For the first time in my life, my magic felt controlled. The referee stared in disbelief. Then he shouted, Marcus is unable to continue. Adrian wins. Gasps erupted across the arena. That's impossible. Did you see that? He destroyed Marcus in one spell. Ethan jumped to his feet in the stands. Adrian. I looked toward the competitor's platform. Victor stood there with his arms crossed. But his smirk was gone. His eyes narrowed carefully as he studied me. For the first time since I arrived at Aurelia Magic Academy, Victor Hale did not look amused. He looked interested. The arena slowly emptied after my victory, but the whispers did not stop. As I walked through the academy courtyard, students stared openly. That's him. The one who defeated Marcus. I thought he was the weakest student. I heard every word. Ethan hurried beside me. Adrian, he said breathlessly, what was that? I don't know. You destroyed Marcus. I didn't plan it. He laughed nervously. Well, whatever it was, it worked. A group of students moved aside as we passed. One of them whispered, "Stay away from him." Another replied, "Did you see that shockwave?" I rubbed my forehead. I hate this attention. Ethan grinned. Better than being laughed at. Maybe. Before we could continue, a calm voice spoke behind me. Adrian. I turned. Professor Aldrich stood near the academy fountain. Come with me, he said quietly. Ethan stepped back. I'll see you later. I followed Aldrich toward the empty training hall. When we entered, he closed the door. You felt it today, he said. Yes. What did it feel like? Like something finally woke up. He nodded slowly. Good. I crossed my arms. You said my magic was sealed. That is correct. Why? He walked toward the center of the room. Because your power is dangerous. Dangerous how? He looked at me carefully. Your parents sealed it years ago. My chest tightened. My parents. Yes. I barely remember them. They knew exactly what you were. I stepped closer. What do you mean? Aldrich spoke calmly. You do not possess ordinary magic. Then what do I have? He answered quietly. Arcane core magic. The words echoed in the hall. I frowned. I've never heard of that. Very few people have. Why? Because it is extremely rare. I stared at my hands. What does it do? It overwhelms other spells. So that shockwave. Yes, he said. Your magic forced Marcus's spell to collapse. That wasn't intentional. It will be eventually. I felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. If my magic is so powerful, why seal it? Aldrich's voice lowered. Power attracts enemies. Enemies. There are people who would try to control you. I swallowed. So my parents sealed it to hide me. Yes. Then why is it breaking now? Because you are growing stronger. I looked toward the shattered training dummies. I thought I was weak. You were never weak. His words echoed in my mind. You were simply locked. Silence filled the hall. Finally I said, what happens now? You continue training. And the tournament? You keep fighting. I hesitated. Victor won't ignore me anymore. No, Aldrich agreed. He's already watching. As if summoned by the words, the door opened. Victor Hale stepped inside slowly. His expression was calm, but his eyes were sharp. I thought I might find you here, he said. I crossed my arms. Looking for something? Yes. Victor stepped closer. That power you used today. What about it? It wasn't luck. No, it was real. I didn't answer. Victor smiled slightly. Good. Why is that good? Because weak opponents are boring. Aldrich watched silently. Victor stopped a few steps away from me. The tournament finals are approaching. I know. I will be there. So will I. His smile faded into something serious. Then we will fight. You're challenging me. Yes. Why? Because I want to see your true strength. I felt my heartbeat quicken. Victor extended his hand slightly. Final round, he said calmly. You and me. I looked at his hand. Then I nodded. Fine. Victor turned toward the door. Good, he said. Before leaving, he glanced back at me. Don't lose before we meet. The door closed behind him. I stood quietly for a moment. Then I looked at Aldrich. Well, I said slowly. That just happened. Aldrich smiled faintly. Yes. I clenched my fists and felt the energy inside my chest again. For the first time, I understood the truth. I had never been the weakest student. My power had simply been waiting. The arena felt different that day. Louder. Heavier. Every seat was filled. Students leaned forward, whispering and pointing at the arena floor where Victor and I stood facing each other. Ethan shouted from the stands, "Adrian, don't die." I looked up and laughed nervously. "I'll try." Victor stood across from me with his usual calm expression. He rolled his shoulders slowly. "You've caused quite a stir," he said. "I didn't plan that." Marcus disagrees. "He attacked first." Victor smirks slightly. "You got lucky once." "I don't think it was luck." "We'll find out." The referee stepped forward. Final round of the Grand Student Tournament. The crowd erupted with cheers. I felt my heart pounding in my chest. Victor raised his hand. "Ready?" he asked. "As ready as I'll ever be." The referee raised his arm. "Begin." Victor moved instantly. Lightning lance. A bolt of lightning shot toward me. Force. My barrier formed just in time. The lightning shattered against it with a violent crack. The impact pushed me backward. Victor smiled. "Good defense." "Thanks." He lifted both hands again. Thunder rain. Multiple bolts fell toward me like spears. Force. My barrier flickered as the lightning struck again and again. I gritted my teeth. "He's fast," I muttered. Victor dashed closer. Pressure wave. A blast of magic slammed into my shield. My barrier cracked. The crowd gasped. Victor stepped forward confidently. "You're stronger than Marcus," he said. "But you're still inexperienced." I steadied my breathing. "You're probably right." "Then surrender." "No." Victor tilted his head slightly. "Why not?" "Because I didn't come this far to quit." He smiled again. "Good answer." Victor raised his hand toward the sky. The air vibrated. Storm King's fury. A massive spiral of lightning formed above the arena. Students in the crowd screamed. Ethan shouted, "Adrian." The spiral crashed down toward me. Fear surged through my chest. Then I remembered Aldrich's voice. "Stop fearing your power. Accept it." I closed my eyes for a moment. Then I whispered quietly, "Arcane core." Energy surged through my body. For the first time, I didn't resist it. I let it flow. My eyes opened. Victor's lightning storm crashed against my magic. Force. The word left my mouth calmly. A wave of arcane energy exploded outward. Victor's storm shattered instantly. The sky above the arena cleared in a burst of light. The entire stadium went silent. Victor's eyes widened. "What?" I stepped forward slowly. Energy surrounded my hands. "Your turn is over," I said. Victor clenched his teeth. "Not yet." He fired one final bolt of lightning. I raised my hand. Force. The arcane wave collided with his spell. The lightning collapsed instantly. Victor was thrown backward across the arena. He landed hard on the stone floor. Silence filled the stadium. Victor tried to stand. Then he fell to one knee. The referee stepped forward slowly. "Victor Hale cannot continue." My chest rose and fell as the words echoed. "Winner, Adrian Vale." The crowd exploded into noise. Ethan jumped up from the stands. "You did it." Victor looked up at me from the ground. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then he laughed quietly. "Well," he said, "I guess you weren't the weakest student after all." The arena had barely emptied, yet the echoes of the duel lingered. Ethan pushed through the crowd to reach me. "Adrian, that was incredible." I laughed shakily. I can't believe it either." He clapped me on the shoulder. "Everyone's talking about you. The boy who couldn't cast a single spell just defeated Victor Hale." I rubbed my eyes, still processing. I wasn't ready for any of this." "Ready or not, you did it." Ethan grinned. Lena appeared beside us, her smile warm. "I knew you could do it." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and disbelief. "Thank you, Lena. Your support, it meant more than you know." She shrugged lightly. You had it in you all along. You just had to see it yourself. Across the courtyard, students whispered and pointed. Some bowed slightly, others gave approving nods. Even Victor stood quietly by the fountain, his pride wounded, his arrogance gone. He approached slowly. Adrian. His voice was calm, almost solemn. I underestimated you. I let my pride blind me. You've earned this. I swallowed, feeling both respect and pity. It's over, Victor. You don't need to fight me anymore. Victor nodded. I know, and I won't forget this lesson. Ethan whooped, pulling me into a half-hug. You changed everything today, man. I glanced at Aldrich, who had been watching quietly from the shadows. He stepped forward. Power does not define you. Your determination does. I absorbed his words, letting them sink in. Determination, I repeated softly. A soft breeze rustled through the courtyard, and for the first time, I felt truly at peace. I looked around at the academy that had once ridiculed me. I was never weak, I whispered. I just didn't know who I was yet. Students who once laughed now looked at me with respect. The labels that had followed me, weakest, hopeless, failure, no longer mattered. Even Ethan's grin seemed wider than ever. So, what's next, Adrian? I smiled faintly. Next? I rise higher than I ever imagined. I keep training, I keep learning, and I don't stop. Lena nodded beside me. And we'll be here to see it all. Victor lingered in the distance, thoughtful, perhaps reconsidering his own path. I turned my gaze toward the academy's towers, the sun glinting off their spires. The future felt vast and limitless. For the first time, I truly believed it. No longer the weakest. No longer uncertain. I was Adrian Vale, the one whose hidden power had finally awakened. And everything had changed.